Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction, Larissa. As you've mentioned, today's topic is the project preparation phase, and in particular, the focus on processes during that project preparation phase, and how you can, basically execute the preparation in a way that you'll be successful with a focus on processes. So let's have a quick look at the agenda. Basically 5 chapters. I start with what to achieve, what needs to be done, the essential aspects, then get it done, showing you how things look in our solution portfolio. I would like to close it off with key takeaways and additional information. So what to achieve? It has been a while that we had the first session of this series. So let me quickly recap and let us quickly re-look at what we've shared in May. It's only 2.5 months ago, but probably a lot has happened in your daily business life. So what were the typical transformation objectives that we discussed back in May? So if you're going to move to Cloud ERP, you move to SAP S/4HANA, and we now here talk in particular about the S/4HANA private cloud, then there is a certain level of mandatory changes that is applicable to the processes and the solution side. Here we have in mind the simplification items and the compatibility scope. But obviously, the intention of a move to SAP S/4HANA is not just to fulfill the needs of introducing mandatory changes. Yeah, just for example, the business partner, which replaces customer and vendor, and there are many more. But to go a next level, to revisit processes, to improve processes. And when we look at customers, and probably you're no different to that, even though I don't know your systems in detail, and assuming you have used SAP ERP for some years, maybe some decades. I have customers in my daily life who even start back in the early 90s with R2. Then at some point of time, processes were harmonized in the sense there was one way of handling a certain business process. But over time, during rollouts, during the replacement of legacy systems, many more process variants have been added for right reasons. Let me say, sometimes for not 100% right reasons, but there is definitely a gazillions of ways of handling a business process, and not all of them are really frequently used or haven't been used in the past years. So while the objective is to move to SAP S/4HANA, it's always a good idea to understand what harmonization and consolidation potential of processes do I have to reduce, for example, testing scope on the one hand side, but also overall system complexity. Standardization, another big subject, I think the last 1.5 years, also articulated from SAP side as a clean core. So only deviate from SAP standard where you really should. And if you deviate, then do it in a way that is not basically writing some ABAP code on the application platform level, NetWeaver, SAP Basis, and whatever you're going to call it, right? But have it really decoupled in an extension platform with whitelisted interfaces. Again, if you transform, review, at least to a certain degree, where do I deviate from standard? Where is code that hasn't been used that I can remediate and basically delete? Tools can support that deletion. But also where I've done enhancements when new capabilities have come in place. A typical scenario, I've implemented SAP back in the early 2000s, for example. At that point of time, the month-end closing was not perfect, so I bought an add-on. I did some custom development, but now new capabilities, new features, for example, would be sufficient because that is not a differentiating process for us. So drive standardization, reduce it, complexity where possible, and then basically also free up time and resources for processes that you want to enhance in the right way where it really matters to your organization. Implement improvements. There's a lot of improvements, tactical, small improvements that literally can be done when understanding how your ERP processes are being run today. That could be, for example, master data. Master data that is not set up in a way that automation capabilities in ERP, I'm not talking about now S/4HANA or Cloud ERP, are being leveraged. So that is something definitely that you should also consider, have an eye on, and we show you how to do that, or I show you how to do that in a minute. And last but not least, there are obviously new innovations. And the difference between improvements, innovations that we highlight here is that improvements are typically sort of a nature that, like master data, you could do anytime, before, during, after. The new innovations leverage new SAP S/4HANA capabilities and that basically require that you are in the project already. Why is this also important? Yeah, it's important because we firmly believe, yeah, that that the opportunity, some say it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, well, maybe it is that once you do the transition, that you really think how many of these processes that have been running for many, many years I want to reuse because they are good. They might be not perfect, but they are definitely not the ones where I want to spend time and money to even further improve them. But where are the ones that I want to rethink? And if you, without any further constraints like time, budget, resources, which obviously somehow limit what options do you have when you transition to SAP S/4HANA. If you just look at a process dimension, and let me say as a first and primary instance of also this webinar today, then you would think, okay, how many processes I really want to reuse and how many want to rethink? And there's obviously always value and risk that is associated. The more you rethink, the more you have to design, the more you have to do change management, but the higher the value is. So there's a balance. There's not the ultimate just do everything new and everything is perfect. So you have to balance things out. But the point, and you probably have already picked it up on the slide, is that knowing this ratio, and I'm not saying academically on the 50.5% to 49.5%, but on the rule of thumb, clustered by, for example, end-to-end processes or line of businesses even, right, gives good indication whether a conversion, a selective data transition, basically a hybrid way of transforming, or a new implementation is important. So what that also says that when we're in project preparation, that if you prepare the project and preparation starts actually before you make the decision when and how to move, right, that you should have an eye on processes because it will be a decisive decision or should be a decisive decision on what transformation path you're going to take. What we looked at is a methodology that we've been developing, co-developing myself together with a colleague, Manuel, and other colleagues behind the scenes in my team, that basically articulated how to approach a transformation when it comes to the process dimension. You might assume being familiar with SAP Activate methodology framework, and that comprises of these phases: discover, prepare, explore, realize, deploy, run, that you always see depicted on the slide. And the process dimension is part, for example, of the application work stream in the Activate methodology. But we believe that it's sometimes a little bit difficult to see where is now the process dimension really being involved in a transformation in these phases. And therefore, we depicted the process dimension here on the slide and the further slides and assets as an own dimension, its own right. We looked at the phases, so it's aligned with SAP Activate. We looked at the milestones. You can see them also being written out on the slide, like transformation strategy defined. And we've said, okay, what we think one would do in each of the phases when it comes to the dimension of processes, and also in the link with the dimension of architecture. Process and architecture, like I would say, you could say brothers and sisters, right? You can see already the word architecture being mentioned, yeah, in here. Good. I see a hand being raised. If that's not super urgent, I would continue and would park to the end. Or is there something super urgent? What is super urgent now is the question.
I think I will ask the guest then if it's super urgent via chat. And please continue.
Okay, so sorry that I don't mean to be rude, right? And but we try to be on time that we can answer those questions that are there. Correct. So you can see those phases, and so those we call them L1 activities. And the focus of today's session, and that's what I want to allude to, is now the discover and prepare phase, basically the preparation phase. So when we talk about the project preparation, then we define this as being discover and prepare in the SAP Activate methodology framework context. So now, what needs to be done? What are these essential activities? Yeah, let us have a look at these essential activities, and you can see it on the slide being depicted. And it's not a full comprehensive list because there's a much more slideware underneath explaining things in detail. But for today's session, we look at this, let me say, rather high-level view. So you can see we have discover and prepare on the slide being shown. You can see the key activities, the could say L1 activities, level 1 activities. So in discover, you perform a strategic planning. You look at your processes, at your function processes, at your end-to-end processes, at your customer journey. You prioritize those processes and segment those processes, for example, whether they are differentiating or not differentiating. So you do like a pace layering on these processes, because you want to understand when you go further whether you have a need to improve processes in an area where they're really important to you, whether you want to standardize processes, where you deviate. So you basically do some groundwork preparation work that is essential to go into the next steps. Then you analyze your processes in architecture. Our mindset, or the mindset of a processes in a transformation, is always to achieve value. Okay? Now you can arguably say, who doesn't want to achieve value or benefit for an organization? Well, there are things you just have to do, right? You have to do, for example, testing, right? There's no doubt about it. You can make your life easy in saying, I don't care about processes. I don't care about process performance today. I'm busy. I have no time. I care, but maybe I'm not busy. But whenever we say you look at processes, it's with the ambition to unlock value potential. Unlock value potential by understanding how the processes are running today, where things are fundamentally not good and they will not become better by just moving to S/4HANA. Obviously, master data is a classical prime example for that. But also where you should basically focus your always limited time and resources by saying, okay, here I want to become better. And very often it's not good or bad, because an organization has many legal entities, many company codes, many plants, many sales orgs in SAP terminology from the org structure. And when you see, and I've had that pleasure many times, look into the systems, you see that sometimes one process is being totally executed fine, high automation, no backlog, no exceptions in one part, let me say, even of our world, right? Let me say in Europe, and then it's not good in Asia. And it might be worse in other areas. So understanding the process performance, understanding where the, let me say, global, holistic problems that should be tackled, or where the isolated pockets, lays the foundation to understand what's the value potential. Next step in the prepare phase, to really align those findings of the discover phase, because again, like probably you would say as always in life, one thing is to find and evaluate things. The next thing to bring them into action and to say, yes, now we're going to make the change. First bit might be hard, but still feasible. But when you come into saying like, those are the specific things we're going to do, we reduce the number of document types in this area because we analyzed they have been hardly used. We decide to really make a master data cleanup initiative because we've seen that purchase requisitions are never being automated to purchase orders because the master data is not fine. That means that you basically estimate the effort, that you find the right people in the organization who have the knowledge and the mandate to do these things. That is where, in my own experience with customers, I see it sometimes a little bit more difficult because there are other projects where these essential resources are being required. Yeah? Typically also business-related projects. So this is the next step in here. And then also in prepare, we prepare the next phase, the explore phase. So we also looked in the preparation of the fit to standard workshops. Now, that basically says we do a process analysis and value identification. A little bit, I would say, simplified high level in the discover phase, and then going deeper into the prepare phase. We do the process execution and variant analysis in the analyze and process and architecture phase, and we look into best practices, for example, here in the preparation of the fit to standard workshops. If we identified an area where we say, hey, we've done our own custom development to run a process, we want to leverage the S/4HANA transformation as an opportunity to come back to standard. Now, how does it look like? Yeah. So looking at the time, giving it the time that we have in here, we want to focus on these three areas and do a little bit of double click in the system on how that looks like. So process analysis and value identification, one. Compromising with what we call out of the box process analysis, internal and external benchmarking, and the generation of a baseline for the value potential. Not sure if you remember, but the solutions that we're going to use, or that I show you in the context of the project preparation and the process dimension, are from the SAP Signavio Process Transformation Suite. And in particular, when we talk here about the out-of-the-box process analysis, we talk about SAP Signavio Process Insights. SAP Signavio Process Insights is a product running on the business technology platform that connects to your existing ERP system. For example, connects also to S/4HANA, connects to further SAP systems. And it has standard, we call them process flows and metrics, performance indicators that allow you to understand your processes. It's out of the box because you don't have to design what you want to see. Basically, at the moment, it's get connected. Depending on what processes you execute, obviously, in the system, data points will be detected and you can start your analysis. So we reduce the time in the sense that you don't have to spend a lot of time to think about what you want to analyze, but that you can start basically next day, once the setup is done, with the analysis of the processes. Then we take it one step further. We look at the process execution variant analysis. So we basically, and you can maybe even see it on these small screenshots, we look into visualizations of a different nature that you might be familiar from process mining. There's also a transaction code analysis where you see the creation of master data objects, whether they've been done with SAP standard or non-SAP standard. And as a third step, as I said, in preparation of the explore phase, we look at the best practices and process architecture definition, and we look at our reference content, that helps to build you a process architecture that helps you to start your process design work in the explore phase. That's what I wanted to show. And having said that, I go in here. I hope you still can see my screen, and you should now see SAP Signavio Process Insights. So SAP Signavio Process Insights, as I said, comes with pre-configured content out of the box analysis. There are 4 types of content objects that exist: the process flows, correction recommendations, the performance indicators, the innovation recommendations. So we start by looking at process flows. So I'm an end user. I'm looking at process flows. And in here, you can see 82 process flows being detected. I can see how many objects have been processed. I can see the type of unit, whether it's items or documents. I can see high-level metrics like completion rates, days to complete, but I also can see issues where blockers, where basically things making the process not running as smooth that they should, that is potentially possible, right? So I can, as a user, saying what are the processes that I'm interested in and mark them as favorites. So I can go in here and saying supply invoice issue without purchase order to FIAP clearing is my favorite, because that's the area where I feel comfortable, where I'm basically also responsible. And then next time I can start with my favorite. There's next to the start page where the content is depicted, I can go also by end-to-end processes. So I can say, okay, I'm going into, for example, source to pay, and I go in a particular area like invoice to pay, and then I see the process flows, or I'm saying I choose to go line by line a business view, and I'm looking at the value drivers. So I'm saying, hey, I'm responsible for source to procurement, and I'm interested in how can I improve my days payable outstanding. I know it's a lot that I'm showing, but I just want to trigger that there are many ways on how you can ingest the content, depending on whether your objective, if you understand value, whether your objective is to start with end-to-end process, or whether you say, okay, well, I'm like a cross-functional unicorn. I can look at everything, right? And I have here my favorites being collected, and I start to work with them. You can see also that we not only show the number of objects we detected, but we also show, hey, where are, for example, process flows with 3 or more blockers, so where there basically is a potential to change something. Similar to the performance indicators, there are single metrics where you, for example, saying, hey, there are 33 performance indicators where the automation could be improved, or we are 114 even, where there's a backlog. Have a look at it. So that's the principle. Now let me look at that particular process flow together with you. And when I open it up, it loads for a moment. Yeah, you can see here, by the way, this is my source system. If I have multiple systems, it's a typical question that that gets asked often. Yeah, we can connect obviously multiple ERP systems or an ERP and S4 system. Then would be a possibility to switch it here. So I collapse this. I don't want to give feedback to the solution, at least right now. And I can see here is my supply invoice issuing without purchase order to FIP clearing. This is the process I'm looking at. There's a couple of things I want to point out here. Yeah, first of all, the data is being regularly collected. Here's the demo system. That's why here's only one time slot being mentioned. But when you would maybe use even Process Insights, and when I work with customers, they basically get regular data collections. The way we collect data depends on the object, whether it's daily, weekly, or monthly, but you basically also build up a history, because that's what you want to understand, how your history is. When you, for example, execute an improvement action, then you would basically look into the system again, into Process Insights a couple of weeks later, and see whether the intended improvement has taken place. We can see here the number of objects being processed. In this particular case, we start with a supplier invoice being issued, so it's 16,200. And we can see also there are blockers. Now, blockers, I said it already very quickly, are basically potential for improvement, because something is not as optimal or as good as it could be for the best possible process. In this case, if you look at the blockers, they are here marked as red. We can see that, for example, the supply invoices are created by a dialog user. And we're saying, hey, that's not good that they're created by a dialog user. They should be created by other ways and measures, let me say it this way. And that's why this is highlighted. And if it's a certain percentage threshold being hit, then it's getting marked as red. Or, for example, we can see that the payment run is not used to pay the invoices, which means that you pay too early or too late very often, and you have a manual effort in paying those invoices. That's a high-level depiction of it. Now, when you start to work with Process Insights, you will very soon saying, this is a bit of like a mixture of all org units, and I need to understand, for example, how is the situation for a particular company code? How is the situation in here? It's limited data, because it's only one Belegart, one document type in here. How does it look there? So you will start building your own variants on how you analyze things. And you can say, okay, that's great. I have used a certain filter, and that basically reduces the number of objects, but also obviously reduces the results. Not so significantly here, but it changes. And this is exactly what I meant early on, that a process doesn't necessarily run bad or good. It depends a little bit on the org unit, on the document types, and on other information. This type of filters I can obviously also save as a variant here, or a view, we call it. And with these views, I can then say I have my standard views, for example, as I said, by company code, by document type, or by many, many other, if you're familiar with SAP, known fields that are relevant for you. For example, you can also see the transaction codes that have been used to create these objects. So if you're saying, hey, I want to already see what type of transactions codes being used, that's also being detected in here. Now, if I look at my supplier invoices and I go do a click on that, then we talked about internal and external benchmarking. So the internal benchmarking means that I can in here look at my, was not the best example I just noticed here, because I fill it on the one company code. So let me just do it like this. Because if you want to benchmark, it's smarter to have something to benchmark, right? So in here, I should now see it. Okay, perfect. So when I want to understand the data and I'm not going straight into the filters, right? Then I also can say, okay, let me start by looking at the benchmarks, or depending on what you filter, the benchmarks obviously always make sense. So in here, we look at the company code, for example. There are other fields how I can benchmark. So again, remember, we are talking about supply invoices. and we look at the particular process until they're getting paid. So for example, I also can look at the suppliers, and I can always see a volume that is associated in here, the number of objects, and I can see the completion rate in this particular case. So I can benchmark with certain pre-filled attributes in here. Again, only one document type, not so much to benchmark. In the systems I'm working on, there are many more benchmarks in here. And I can then here go on the detailed list. So on the detailed list, I can see really the documents that have been extracted from the underlying source system. What is not set up in here, but still I want to mention it, even if you can't see it, it's linked to the source system, right? So if you have HTML for GUI or sub GUI for HTML, I hope I said it exactly correct, being activated, you can do a click on there and go to your source system looking at this particular document number and can see the document flow, for example. So that step in here that I was just flying really over is very essential, because the tool SAP Signavio Pro's Insight is super fast in retrieving content out of your ERP system. And then the next step is that you think about, okay, who is basically responsible for which process, for which value driver, as I showed. And then you start, I always say, playing around. You might not say playing, but do a structured analysis. You think, okay, what are the criteria by which I want to slice and dice the data? What are the filters that I want to set up? And start creating your favorites, start creating your filters, and then going into the individual findings. And just one more example. If you, for example, go to the FI payment items not cleared by a payment run, so basically saying there are certain payments that are not done via the payment run, you can see, okay, numbers of items affected. You can see numbers of items not affected. So there's a lot of them that are being paid by the payment run, but some are not done by the payment run. And if you go to the details, then you can see here the details document that are affected by this finding. And then typically in the conversations I have with customer, the next step is to saying, okay, I take a sample of those and understand. And then there might be legitimate reasons why you don't pay those vendors with a payment run, because of ABC. You look at this, and you look also where there are certain new capabilities, we call them innovation recommendations, for example, a situation handling, which is a capability that we introduced many years ago in S/4HANA, are meaningful. And if you wish, you can always go and do a click and go into how does it look like in our online documentation. So the idea is to understand your processes, to understand process inefficiencies, blockers basically on the one hand side, but on the other hand side also to understand improvement potential that you want to leverage. Now there's one more step. If you remember the slides, maybe, or we look at the recording and you look at the slides, this is the value analysis. So we have, let me do one more step back. We have, next to the process flows, we also have individual metrics. And these individual metrics are so-called performance indicators of different types. So I was saying a couple of times, master data is a very common subject. Automation, how we can improve automation. Where's backlog that no one takes care because no one realized, and basically it's like sand in an engine which doesn't make the engine running really smooth. So these type of individual performance indicators also exists, right? For example, the usage of supplier data, customer master data, material master data, very typical elements that we would recommend you to look at. And if I do a sidestep before going to value analysis, we even have a tab for that, which is called transformation planning, where we do a filter on that, where we're saying, hey, if you do the transformation planning, this is exactly what the session is all about, project preparation, right? Then here we have recommendations of things you can immediately take an action on. For example, look at your transactional data. Or if you look at the performance indicators, we're saying, look at the master data I was alluding to. So bear that in mind. Wasn't on the slide, but I just thought it's useful to highlight that. That's what you can see this application is designed for, to support the planning, the project preparation phase. Now, I made a side step to saying the individual performance indicators. I also said at the beginning that we have a concept of value drivers, basically areas where you can drive value. And one is, for example, reduce finance costs. And for finance costs, there are multiple performance indicators that one could analyze to improve finance costs, similar to reduce sales costs. Yeah, you can see the list in here. And we continuously, because we have monthly releases, add new indicators to that. And what we do is we take a look at the results. For example, the number of electronic bank statements not being completed. And we see our current value, and we just define what we want to achieve. And when you say we, basically it's you. You can go to the edit button. You can manipulate, correct the metrics that we provided. These are specific metrics, like saying average time required to perform a manual closing and not an automatic closing, basically, because the posting has not been completed. And by this, we allow a very simplified version of value calculation that you basically can then adjust. So, process analysis and value identification as part of the project preparation is for us, when it comes to processes, essential to drive change. Now, I said, remember, there was SAP Signavio and there was Process Insight. You might remember also the terminology of plug and gain, or you process intelligence. So all the data that we have here comes in a standardized way in a format because it's a cloud product, right? You cannot change the screen, rename things in here. To support, let me say, more flexible analysis, and also to have a different view on the data, we have basically put the content into our reference business architecture. Our reference business architecture compromises of end-to-end processes, such as, for example, source to pay. You can see in here. And when you click on source to pay, let me say it this way, and therefore we build a process house up. If you would be a long-term customer of SAP Signavio, or unfortunately you have another process modeling tool, you have your process house. You have your L1, L2, L3, L4 hierarchies. Very often when I work with customers, that's not the case, or maybe there's parts here, parts there, but there's no overall. Therefore, we basically bring along, again, as content to our products. It's always content and products, a so-called value accelerator. Let's say content. The content is the process house. And we use our standard process house that comes up with our reference architecture. So if we go to source to pay, and if you go to source to pay, and I close this and make it a little bit bigger, I go to invoice to pay, and in invoice to pay, we have the supplier payment from purchasing. So pretty similar area where I've just been in the SAP Signavio Process Insights. And if I go on this SAP supplier payment from purchasing, I can see that there is further context. Yeah, I can go to the process flow in SAP Signavio Process Insights. That is exactly where I've just been a minute ago when I worked directly in SAP Signavio Process Insights. But I also can look at the process execution analysis, the process variant analysis, and the transaction code analysis. Those are the three major ones. The process quantity is a summary of the quantities, more like a health check. The first three ones I want to have a look at. Before I do so, I want to highlight, and you've seen the red, because red is always a signal color. I think you noticed that one. There is something which is called a best run score. The best run score is an aggregated information whether we see here an improvement potential. Again, similar to the blockers and thresholds there. So we look at a process, we look at, for example, the transactions that's being used. And if we then see that single transactions and mass transactions, for example, are used very heavily, then we downgrade or downrate the best run score and saying here is a potential for improvement. So similar to the blockers and issues that you've seen in Process Insights, we also have here an early warning indicator. Now, process execution analysis. If I'm gonna click on this one, I close this and I close this to have a little bit more space in here. is one of the three things we have a quick look at: execution, variant, transaction code analysis. And you can see, I would say, typical process execution diagrams. You call it process discovery in here. So you can see we somehow start with a supply invoice, and somehow the invoice is getting paid at the end in here. But in between, there are numerous ways how the process has been executed. And definitely not all of them make sense. In here, it's a display only in this demo system. That's why I cannot filter so nicely, but you can filter by the same criteria I was showing. For example, the company code, the document type. You can see what are the most frequently used ones, yeah? So to get an idea, what are the outliers, what is the normal one? But you can see it looks like spaghetti. That's why these diagrams are called spaghetti sometimes, yeah? That there's a lot of like variants. And yeah, truly speaking, if all of them exist, then you should better all of them test, for example, them. But probably the first thing is you want to understand, do I really need all of them? Or some are a result of a wrong configuration, some of a result of people not being authorized correctly, is an education issue. Now then we come to the process execution paths. Process execution path is, I was talking about the best run score, our underlying content that we use. So we look at the execution of a process, and you can see here the best run scores, and we can see we start with an issue supply invoice, and we can see here the invoice is created by a dialogue user. And we can see this is the thick water pipe in here. And there are, again, also other ways, other transactions being used. And we highlight, okay, here is an improvement potential wide in 9,900 times a dialogue user is being used. So if you know process modeling, this is not a process model as such that you would use, and we'll see in a moment when it comes to the best practices, that is how you would model a process. But we use basically this split into, for example, transactions, how you do it in a solution, to unfold and show the variety of how process is being executed. It's also useful because some of the ways you execute a particular process, which is a transaction at the end of the day, are no longer supported in S/4HANA. So you get also an insight next to the simplification item analysis, whether certain decommissioned transactions are being affected for you, or have an impact on you because you're going to use them. Also, just as a little brain marker for you, best run scores, obviously, is the calculation, and I said it early on. It's not always the same for the company codes. And we have customers, and probably maybe some of us in the call, who have multiple ERP systems. So if they're going to make the move to the cloud ERP, then it's not only about new implementation, selective data transition, and system conversion that I was showing earlier, but it's also about a system consolidation, a landscape consolidation. And here it's quite useful to understand how processes are being run today. Let me say that is a subject in its own right, whether you should spend time looking into as is if you're going to the to be. We firmly believe, I want to say crisp, and maybe that provokes discussion, that it makes sense that at least some people in a transformation project understand how processes are being executed today. Otherwise, it's a walk in the dark, let me say, on your future processes, and you don't know how much change occurs for the systems and company codes, at the end of the day, end users, if you don't know how they work today. We look at the process variants. So we can see in here the same diagram, and we can see in here, when we look at the process variants, there are cycle times. We can see the number of cases, so we can sort here by cycle time, by number of cases. You can see how frequently which process is being used. What is the process execution? It's a process execution path here that we talk about that takes the longest, takes the shortest, yeah? And it's usually a hockey stick, yeah? There's many which are hardly used, and then there's a few which are often used. So this is basically how can I reduce underlying system complexity. It is groundwork that we do here, right? It's detecting things that no one was aware about, and when people are aware about it, then they make the decision. Remember my slide is saying, yes, now we're going to clean it up because we anyway need to test. What we can also look at the process variant performance by looking into the blockers, right? So if you look into the variants, we can see where we have, for example, issues with supply invoices and detect the data with these particular variants and cluster it. So there's a lot of like predefined content on how you can look into the data. I want to close it off, but just jumping to the transaction code analysis. Transaction code analysis, there's a lot of like writing also that supports basically the usage. If you see it a little bit when I scroll a little bit shorter, not so fast around the screen. Then you can see we start with an overview. So we can see invoice creation, invoice release, invoice clearing in here. And we can go a little bit further and go to the invoice creation step. And we can see the transactions that are being used by company code. So here are our company codes, here are our transaction, and we can see that mirror is used in the company code FO1, probably Frankfurt 01, for example, but there is also the set invoice that is used in US. So it seems, just looking at that data, in the US, there is a custom code transaction being heavily used. So question is, why is this the case? Why is that set in if they're being used? And to start an analysis and further discussion in here. Now, looking a little bit at the time, I just move to the last part that was on the slide. It was about best practices and process architecture definition. I said it when I went to the process house. We have a reference business and reference solution architecture, so reference content available. And in the SAP Signavio Process Explorer that you can access, also if you're not yet Signavio customer, we have our capabilities, our business processes, but also our solution processes. And if I just take one route into the content and go via the SAP product portfolio and go to the SAP S area, I can see that I'm now in the public edition, but I could also go, for example, to the private cloud in here. Then I can go in an area like, for example, finance, and go in finance into the account and financial close as one business process area. And in here, I then can see, sorted by alphabet, the business processes. So for example, the J58, the account and financial close. So if I go in account and financial close, I can see it comprises of business process diagrams. This is a standard naming, yeah, J58. And then I, for example, can go into a monthly end closing and see how monthly end closing is being executed. What are the process steps? Yeah, typically an example probably that you're familiar with. Yeah, but imagine, for example, also if you would be a customer not familiar with SAP at all, that is the content. So, and it's also the foundation if you do a system conversion to saying, hey, let me go and see how a standard process looks like, because maybe I only know Z code transaction and I'm not familiar with how standard looks like anymore. So that was really a quick ride through VM project preparation. What is the goal? Understanding how the processes are being run today, to do an out-of-the-box process analysis, starting with very structured, predefined content. Doing a benchmarking. I was now looking at the internal, to be honest, only. We can do similar on the external side. To understand also what is the value. And it's just, again, a brain mark I said earlier on, because you need to understand where's value, because there's value you want to dig deeper when it comes to prepare phase. To understand how you execute the processes and understand how many process variants do you have to drive harmonization. And to look at, for example, also the transaction codes in detail on the master data objects to see where is potential to standardize. Going back to the very first slide, talking about what are the objectives and what are the problem statement. And then I was quickly jumping into the best practices and the best practice processes, here only not into the capabilities in the SAP Signavio Process Explorer. Yeah, just looking at the time, a few more comments. How does it look like? Yeah, this is really work that we've done with customers. Yeah, where we said we want to come from business outcomes to value drivers. Yeah, remember what I showed Process Insights, looking what KPIs and PPIs, what the single metrics and process flows are relevant, to do benchmarking, and then to find use cases, what needs to be changed. And this is, to be honest, excellent, but we can do the same in our Analytics Cloud to create dashboards. And you can see the lead to cash, the sales documents created, and here where it's grayed out. These were systems, the black box, and entities like US01, FR01 that we analyzed here. So this heat mapping, including benchmarking, important. And then what we did as well here, we used the capability in SAP Signavio Process Insights to do a calculation. You remember maybe a little bit the screen from the screenshot from the demo I did. And we did in Process Intelligence, we set up a value tracking so that we have more specific formulas, even where we filled out certain object types and so forth on to set up a value tracking. Another example is that we used this plug-in gain analysis that I was showing a second ago, understanding process variance at another customer, taking this into account. Similar, we took the design accelerators into account, like the best practice models, yeah, and we used them. So in short, and it's really short, what I'm saying is there's not the one size fits all, depending on the transformation that you want to embark on, whether you're a net new customer or an existing customer, when you want to consolidate, whether you have a wider landscape transformation that you're performing, certain capabilities of what we put into methodology will be more relevant. Others will be, let me say, less relevant. I want to be transparent. And it's, I think, better to have done a few things right than to do many things, somehow, and then not having them sustainable. And build an organization takes also time, and to skill people takes also time. So it's a bit of like, what I can put into my cloud ERP transformation. So key takeaways. We believe, I hope at least at a very, very high level, reflecting on the little time that we have, you should understand that we have some capabilities to create process transparency. You should have also seen that we think about optimization potential, that it be short term, saying here are things that you can correct, that it be longer term. These are things that you can take into account as new capabilities. And we support with what we have in our content, our design accelerators, best practices. We support the design work and the preparation, for example, of fit to standard workshops. Additional information. This SAP Signavio for S/4HANA transformation is one, but by far not the only use case when it comes to process analysis and process modeling and process design, because arguably that's a thing you can do at any point of time. But we've, as I said in the first slide, in the recap, because we see that there's a huge, let me say, momentum when customers do the transformation, that they say, better look at the processes, because what can I simplify? What is the right transformation path? How I can reduce testing complexity? We have basically put this together in what we're going to call a SAP Activate Accelerator. And the SAP Activate Accelerator has become part of our process, of our Value Accelerator Library, or VAL. So if you go to the SAP Signavio Process Explorer, you can access it. And there is, and this is number 3, where I'm now looking at here, right? There's a Value Accelerator Library, and this library consists of many value accelerators. Yeah, for example, one that talks about risk mining, ones that talk about mining in certain areas, but one is this Activate Accelerator. And if you have a workspace that you already own, you can deploy that content into your own workspace. That basically means that you can interactively go through all of the phases to what I've shown today, or parts of what I showed today. I was only able to show parts, but also of the next phases, such as explore, realize, test, deploy, and run. And you will also always see what are the business capabilities. That's very important. That's why I want to put a few seconds on it. What are the business capabilities independent of the solution, and what are the solution capabilities? Because when we build this Activate Accelerator, we wanted to make clear these are things someone needs to be doing, business activities, business capabilities, And this is how it's being done with our suite. And fair enough, if you have something else in place, all right. And we say that and we accept this, but still somehow we see that there is absolutely need to put it in a structured context and describe roles, responsibility, activities, and tasks. It's a bit of an accelerator for a project plan, to be honest, in here. So I would very much welcome, if you intend to use Signavio, if you have for other reasons in your organization, Signavio workspace, if you deploy that content and do a double click on it. And then I would like to close it off with a few more additional links where you can, for example, take a starting point into the process analysis by looking at SAP Signavio Process Insights Discovery Edition. I mean, we have done already a lot of like promotion about what sometimes is called Spider, so SAP Signavio Process Insights Discovery Edition. And the Discovery Edition is from the look and feel how SAP Signavio looks like, but from the content, it's limited so that you're saying, okay, this is a particular process flow, and there's, I think, 1 out of 3 that you can choose to do an analysis on. But if you want to saying, hey, I like what I see, but that was a little bit unprecise, Michael, I need to have something in my fingers. How does it look like? I cannot buy the license tomorrow. I don't have the license. Where can I get started? Then that would be my tip or my recommendation, my ask, call to action, that you make yourself familiar with the SAP Signavio Process Insights Discovery Edition. So basically my second ask, next to the Activate Accelerator. So that's it. I hope you found that useful, and now I'm more than happy to look at the questions which are in the chat, or maybe someone wants to unmute and ask an additional question.
All right. First of all, thank you, Michael, for this presentation and demo. It was very insightful. We have a couple of questions via Q&A tool, and Robert is very busy answering them and actually typing the answers. So I would probably pick up the question that just arrived that Robert didn't check yet. And I can state it directly. The question is, are there any useful materials or documentations for project manager to assist execution of day-to-day activities step by step?
Yeah, there's 2 that come to mind, Terry. I mean, first of all, thanks for asking the question. I mean, one is, and hard to judge for you if I haven't shown it, is this Activate Accelerator. I'm not sure if it's already day by day. It's more phase by phase and activity by activity, if I want to stick to that. But that would be definitely a recommendation. And also you can reach out to your SAP context that, if you're not yet using Signavio, that you get an in-depth introduction into this one, and it becomes even more tangible that I was able to show today. I'm very, very sure. And then we can post this into the questions that we into the answers. I don't have the link right now. I need to search it. We have in our help documentation for SAP Signavio an explanation, for example, how we see the usage of SAP Signavio in future standard workshops. And that's a very classical question. So in some areas, we have also online documentation. But I think that those are the 2 that should help you to get it more tangible.
All right. Maybe you can enrich your materials with these 2 links. I think this would be of a help.
Yeah.
So again, to all the participants, there is a chance now to bring up questions to Michael. Also, if you want to speak up, please raise your hand. The person who raised the hand in the beginning, unfortunately, is not in the call anymore, so we can't ask what was the question, but maybe he will contact you directly for whatever follow-up. Maybe what we can also do, maybe we can ask Robert to give a short summary of the question that he already answered, just to get a glimpse of maybe there are some important points that are also relevant for the audience. Robert?
Yes, of course. So we had questions mainly about if it's possible to extend the analysis scope also to non-SAP ERP systems? And the question here is, of course, yes. So what Michael showed mainly was the out-of-the-box instant analysis with SAP Signavio Process Insights. And the objective here is also in your S4 transformation to really get to instant, broad insights into your process performance, to understand where to focus during your S4, where the value potential is, and then deep dive really into understanding the value. If you have non-SAP ERP systems and you're interested also in understanding how they perform in the end-to-end process, procure to pay, then we have another solution that supports you here, and this is called SAP Signavio Process Intelligence. We had some other questions also on content that's available in the procure to pay area, especially the question here to Ariba, and also the answer is here yes. SAP Signavio Process Insights that Michael explained is also capable not only to connect to your SAP ERP ECC and S4HANA backend system, but also to SAP Ariba, our line of business solution here, in order to perform, let's say, procurement performance analysis of your data and processes running in SAP Ariba. And this was mainly the summary of the questions that have been asked in the Q&A.
All right, thank you, Robert. I can see one more question that just arrived, and it's about cost of using Signavio.
Yeah, that's a good question. Costs are always important. I can only answer it in a generic manner because the details depend. Let me say, I looked at today at Process Insights. Process Insights is not based on users, it's based on data volume. So not based on users or process flows or content. So there's let me say, a fee for the source systems you connect. So it's an ERP system, it's multiple ERP systems. So that's basically the trigger. And on costs, because it depends on the region. With a no price, it's a wrong price because we have regional prices, and then you have maybe existing contracts. Got to talk to your SAP point of contact. So that's Process Insights. And then I looked into Plug and Gain when I want to be answering in line with what I've shown. Plug and Gain compromise of Process Insights and Process Intelligence and Process Manager you've seen. And then I look at the Process Manager, and Process Intelligence and Process Manager, they are depending on Process Intelligence, the number of records, so the data volume basically, and this part, and Process Manager on the number of users. So yeah, no, it was not a conclusive answer in the sense it's whatever, 1 or 2 euros or something like that. But hope it gave you a little bit an idea what you need to bring on the table. So number of systems you want to analyze, number of users that you envisage. So, and then and I say we, the big SAP, can have a conversation with you on this one.
Right, I can see one raised hand from Claudia. So Claudia, you can go ahead and talk. Ask to unmute. We can't hear you. You seems to be on mute, or the system is not allowing us.
Not sure what accident, Claudia, or otherwise you type something in the Q&A.
Yes, or if it's, you can also, of course, contact us directly after the session. For whatever reason, we can't hear you. It doesn't work. I try to promote you to panelist. Maybe you can. It will work then. So it didn't work yet.
Maybe in the meantime, also adding to what Michael just said, I think you can see my screen. SAP Signavio, as he said, is a process transformation suite consisting of different components. So regarding the cost, each and every component you can license separately or in predefined bundles, and what to license is relevant on your use case. So if it's an analysis use case, if it's a documentation modeling use case, or if this is an automation use case, and depending also on the product, as Michael said, we have either database storage or number of users. So this also depends. So therefore, please go to your account executive that is responsible for you, for your company, and there you will get all relevant information.
All right, with this, I suggest we close the session. We are a bit over the time, and for Claudia, I can only recommend to contact us directly, either Michael directly or myself, so I can create a bridge to Michael, and we will be happy then to handle your request. There is one more question arrived. In terms of data privacy, what is in place?
That's a lot, right? Because there's a whole bunch of documentation pros insights. Maybe it's the quickest we add that link. Robert, remind me if I forget it when I add it to the slides. That's easier. So they have a data privacy concept in the sense that this runs on an own account. You can restrict authorizations on who's allowed what data. You can say, don't take any personal data, or I restrict a few personal data. There's retention and deletion capabilities. Yeah, so I think it's easier to share a few links. Yeah, not to being shy on answering, but that's like a 20 minutes monologue. Otherwise, that would have on that one. It's a bit, but it's
all right.
One point to consider. Let me say, never to be considered too late. Yeah.
All right. So again, thanks for that. I think it's a good suggestion just to add the relevant links to the materials of this session. The materials will be shared with all participants. It's a playlist with all the sessions that already took place. And yes, the materials will be available probably tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. It always takes a bit until they are uploaded, but they will be definitely there. With this, again, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Robert, for bringing up the presentation and answering the questions. And of course, thank you very much to our audience for being with us. We are always happy to have you live in our sessions, and we hope to see you soon. With this, thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you very much. And yeah, all the best to you. Thank you.